Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here with a first-time Veronica Live guest. His name is Jake Novak. He is a political and economic analyst, and I bumped into you on X, and I was like, hey, I need you to come on my show so we could chat. And then, of course, researching you, I've really enjoyed getting to know who you are on social media and Substack. So welcome, Jake, to Veronica Live.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I guess what I love the most, and I am now going to be a regular, is your Jake's Takes. So you do 5 news stories in 3 minutes, and of course your voice is amazing. So I'm very excited. So I'm a new fan of Jake's Takes, and I will be tuning in all the time.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I love, I don't know why, I kicked myself. Why didn't I think of this sooner? It's like that joke in... It's like that joke in There's Something About Mary where the guy goes like, I have this great idea, it's about, it's an ab video so people can work on their abs. And the guy's like, yeah, they already have this. It's called 7-minute abs. Like, no, this will be 6-minute abs. So, like all these people who do 5 and 10-minute news stuff, I thought, like, I can actually do 5 stories in 3 minutes and give you analysis on all 3 stories in 3 minutes. So that's my goal.
You're absolutely fabulous. And I don't want to tell you that movie's something, what is it? Something's called Mary. What was it called again? That movie.
There's Something About Mary.
Yes, yeah. It's such a boy movie, and I laughed the entire movie. I'm so embarrassed to say. It was so good. Yeah. But no, I'm wanted to have you on because you're all kinds of things. And let's just start first, because when I was trying to get you to come on, today is 9/11. It's a somber day. We all know where we were that day. I was in Las Vegas. I was in the military, and my husband was TDY, also in the military. And a bunch of my friends were when they retired from the military, a lot of fighter pilots go and they fly airlines. My brother-in-law was flying. A bunch of my friends' husbands were flying. Oh, yeah. And so that morning I will never forget because it was cringeworthy. And, I had the TV on the rest of the day because I wasn't working that day, and I kept my children home. And, of course, where were all my friends' husbands and my brother-in-law? So it was horrible. And I know you messaged, and I wanted you to tell everybody what happened because you were there and what you saw and how it's impacted your life.
I was working at CNN at the time. I was running a business news show that was actually running on CNN National. I've been doing business news there on CNN's now defunct business channel. And we got the big call up with the show I was running with Jack Cafferty, who was really popular, to do a 1-hour version of our show for the whole CNN audience. So this is a big step up for me. We had our 9/11 was on a Tuesday, so we had our premiere show on Monday. And I remember we had kind of a bumpy day. And then we had just wrapped up we were on from 7 to 8 a.m. We had just wrapped up our show for the Tuesday, and we were just on a real high because the show was so much better than it had been on Monday. And then I walked back to my desk. At that time, CNN's offices were on 34th and 9th. I had in Manhattan, and I had a very clear view from the window at my desk of the Twin Towers. I always look at them. So I saw both jets fly into the buildings with my own naked eyes.
Oh, gosh.
Knew it was a terrorist attack immediately. And then spent the rest of the day trying to get out of Manhattan. I was living in the borough of Queens at the time, which is over the bridge of the East River. And happy to say I got there, didn't have any loved ones or friends lost. We did have some volunteer firefighters working in the crew at CNN who were like technical crew guys who I was friendly with, who did run to the towers. And I got to say it was an anxious few days because I didn't see them again for another few days, but they all survived too, I'm happy to say. And obviously that was a harrowing day. But so I certainly do not consider myself a 9/11 survivor, but I'm certainly a 9/11 eyewitness. I'll say that.
And how did it change you? I mean, I was all the way in Las Vegas, and I feel like it was, somebody kind of ripped out our heart in America, and I still have like a United We Stand license plate that I've always had when I've lived in America, because that's how much it means to me. And one of my friends, Don, he's coming on after you today. His brother was actually killed in 9/11, and so we have a bond, and every year he comes on my show and we talk about it. So how did it change you?
It's funny. I think I'll work from the backwards on in because I think of kind of bigger stuff as now it's 23 years later. I can tell you that while I had been wavering on the idea of the Second Amendment going before 9/11, it absolutely made me a major Second Amendment supporter.
Really?
I just kept thinking as the information came out that a couple of guys with box cutters had almost brought down the country. And I just kept thinking, what if somebody on that jet legally had a gun on them? And of course, and I wasn't thinking about an air marshal program at that time. I was just thinking about, someone who's never committed a felony, someone who has, who needs a handgun for protection in his life or her life. Why shouldn't they be allowed to bring it on, to bring it on a plane? And if it's secured, in a lockbox or something like that. And I just kept thinking like, well, that's the end for me in gun control. Not that I was a huge gun control advocate. I had been as a very young kid, but certainly not. And so that's one of the things I think about all the time. Like that was when I became a supporter of the Second Amendment completely and a real purist on that. Wow. I also, look, for a lot of us who've been longtime supporters of Israel and really well educated in the conflict, we knew that this was an opportunity, sadly. We didn't want it to happen that way, but for more Americans to understand what Israel had been going through every day. They suffered 9/11s and do suffer 9/11s pretty regularly over there. And for the same reasons, crazed ideology. It's got nothing to do with poverty. It's got nothing to do with American policy. Both of those things can make things worse. But, it was a good time for us to argue. And when it came out that Osama bin Laden was behind it, it was a good example of trying to break down some of the misconceptions people have. People think that crime is a result of poverty or of desperation. What desperation did Osama bin Laden have? He was a rich kid from day one, highly educated. There was nothing for him to be personally. Yeah. And then the shoe bomber a couple of years later was also a rich person. Many of the hijackers on 9/11 were rich and well-educated people. So it was time for us to explain that ideology was the problem, that we were kowtowing to ideology in our, and we still do, by the way. We still have this Cold War mentality that we'll accept any, we'll work with anyone even if their ideology makes no sense and leads to further wars. And it doesn't mean we have to re-educate people, but we need to consider who our alliances are with and things like that. And, so I thought about that a lot. And, of course, there were the inevitable conspiracy theories that came out afterwards, which is not only the fault of human nature, but the fault of our government, which still doesn't tell us everything. I think that it's pretty clear what happened. But there are some things that they continue not to tell us, and then they get angry when people start conspiracy theories. Like, what do you expect? Come clean with the American people.
Right. Well,
and they don't do that.
You
Go ahead.
You posted, which I didn't know this, about 40%. Talk about the DNA and 9/11. That a lot of people, we don't know who they are, I guess. That was on your X.
Yeah. I just saw the statistic this morning. Apparently it was reported first last year, and then now it's been much more corroborated. 40% of the bodies that they found at the World Trade Center have not been identified. We don't know who they are. Now, a lot of that, I don't want to make it sound, because there's a lot of families out there that are looking to identify remains, so I do not want to insult them. So a lot of that is because of technology. We have a piece of a fingernail. We're going to get there. We don't have the technology yet to get a full DNA match, full DNA information on that. But another reason for this is the state of loneliness and the way we live in America today. There's hundreds of people, bodies, that will never be claimed because there was no one looking for them. And it's just so sad because I think that we're a much lonelier country than we were 23 years ago, but obviously it was still pretty bad back then. So it's something to remember, if you don't have an immediate family member or a family member that you're living with or in contact every day, it doesn't mean that you're not loved. It doesn't mean that you don't have it, but you should, if there's any message I can give based on that aspect of the story is stay in contact with your loved ones or people who are important to you as much as possible. You don't want to, because if everything happens to you, you want to be identified when you're dead. I mean, that's not the reason I'm saying that would be very morbid. That would be incredibly morbid. But, think about the times when you're not dead. What if you're sick? What if you're not, what if things like that? Like we need to be connected at least with our loved ones and the people we're close to. And it's just heartbreaking that between the families who can't identify so they can have a real burial, and the people who will never be claimed at all, who don't have any family waiting for them, don't have any family looking for them. It's pretty sad all the way around.
So last night, someone that I know that lives in New York sent me a picture of the Twin Towers, the lights, and World One, and so I shared that on all my social media, and people have been sharing that picture today, and when I go to New York a lot, and I love seeing World One, and then when you walk around and see the names, like I'm always so moved, because we're always, especially in New York, you're on the go. Does it move you? Because literally when I'm hanging out in Soho and Greenwich, I'm Soho, I'm seeing it all the time. So, and I'm so moved by that. Are you, as a New Yorker, moved like I am, who just comes to visit every few months?
Yeah, I mean, I have to give I have to have a confession here. I have never gone to those Ground Zero. I've never gone to Ground Zero since those attacks.
Really?
I didn't, not that I went regularly. Not that I went I didn't go regularly anyway, but I have never returned, and I didn't go to the memorials, and that's because I just felt like I don't need to go to a memorial to be reminded of what happened. Mm-hmm. I really didn't have anyone close to me or anyone that I knew. I knew some people tangentially who were killed. I had a very good friend who should have been. I mean, if he had been to work as early as he usually gets, so that certainly hit me pretty hard at that point, but. Yeah, no, I haven't done that, but it doesn't mean I don't think about it all the time. It's just, one of the reasons why I don't focus that much on 9/11 every day as much as I used to is because I really think we're in more danger as a country now than we were then. We have more threats now. There are more people attacking us now. I don't even think there's any question of that. And because of that, I don't think that I don't know if it's other than days like today that it's that helpful to focus on 9/11 all that much, because we have that same threat exists from Islamist terrorism. It's terrible, and we need to be reminded of that threat. But sadly, it goes well beyond that attack. And I think that we have other threats now. I think that we are more attacked and in many ways more invaded in this country than ever before, certainly than 23 years ago. So. It's one of those things where it's not that I don't care about it. I care about it a lot. It's just, it seems like it's like focusing on an abacus when we need to be using a calculator every day. That it's a huge attack, but only a building block in where we are today.
So, and I want to ask you about Israel, because we're going to tie all this together too. But tell me some more about your background too, because it says on your X, proud Jew and Zionist. So what is all of your background, Jake? And you were on a Next Space earlier today, because I saw you on there when I was show prepping for my show. Yeah.
Well, I mean, most of my career, right now I'm a political and economic analyst, and I do a lot of writing, and I make TV appearances and radio appearances, and that's most of what I do right now. And in hopes of getting one kind of forum, like my own show, which is, in the works, I'm happy to say.
Oh, cool.
The thing that I'm doing, what I did for 30 years is I ran television news programs. I was at CNN, like I talked about before. I was at CNBC. I was at Fox. I did local news. I've been on some international channels. And I did that all the way through pretty much just before the COVID lockdown, just before COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And that happened to be fortuitous, because I went to work for the Israeli consulate doing their communications for a couple of years.
Wow. Okay, so that's when you were a diplomat. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And the reason why that was fortuitous is because that meant I got to travel when everyone else was locked down. I got to go all over the world.
Wow.
And then I did that for a couple of years, because I'm not a career diplomat, and I'm not an Israeli citizen. I was just kind of there as a kind of outside consultant, but on their payroll. And cool. Then but I had to register as a foreign agent, which I did, and did all that stuff. And then I decided that, no, it was time for me to get back in the business, but I didn't want to run another person's show. I wanted to run my own. So that's kind of where I am right now.
I love it. So let's talk, because I know you're going to have feelings about what happened with Israel. I just had an Israeli commando on my show. He's got a book that launches October 7th. I've always stood with Israel. I'm a Catholic girl, and I feel like I'm a baby Xer. So I've just, especially this week, in the last 3 days, like 300,000 views, because you fight back on everything. And I've been beat up so much being a Catholic girl supporting the Jews, and I'm like, why isn't everybody supporting the Jews? So tell me, I feel like that day was your 9/11, and I've heard people say that. and I'm so angry because I've fought even people in my sphere, family, friends that think that Hamas is, peachy. So tell me through your eyes how you see it, because I'm over it. And plus, all of these college, all this protests, Thanksgiving, I was up in New York. I was up this spring. Every single damn day was like a Hamas protest. One day they even took over the Brooklyn Bridge, but it's not just in New York.
Yeah.
So,
no.
So how do you see all this? Because I'm so angry. Like, I've seen clips of some of the videos, but I'm not even brave enough to watch, what went down, because I just don't want it stained in my head, because I know what happened, right? Because I've read the accounts. So how do you see it?
Well, we should make sure that we use the right terminology. These are not protests on our college campuses or on our streets. These are attacks. These are terrorist attacks made to disrupt traffic, which is an attack on law and order, to hurt the emotions and to frighten people. These are attacks. They're not protests. So let's make sure we get that clear. There are members of Hamas, members of Hezbollah who are embedded with these protesters, so-called protesters. These, the cheerleaders, I would say, for the attackers. Not many, but they're there. They're on campuses. They're on the streets. This is just another form, and they've been instructed not to get fully violent yet. This is not, they're not flying planes into buildings every day or planning to do that yet. But this is just as bad. It's disrupting our society. It's disrupting our highest levels of our highest places, these places of higher education, our transportation. And they're very much hoping that somebody gets violent with them so they can have an excuse to go crazy. There was an African-American man when they were blocking the Brooklyn Bridge, as you alluded to, who pushed one of them aside to get to his daughter. And had that not been an African-American man, had that been a white man or a white woman, certainly a white man, there would have been a riot. But they decided that would look bad, so they left him alone.
Great.
We got lucky there. Frankly, we got lucky. I hate to say that.
It was funny, though. I say this jokingly because I was so moved. Well, this part's not a joke, but when I was walking through New York and they had the hostage pictures like on the wall, like that was the Israeli hostage, like in New York City on the wall. That was like so moving. But then when I was trying to go to Nordstrom because I don't have one, and I made it to the mothership up there, and all of a sudden there's all these protesters piling out, but they were they all looked ridiculous with their, they were wearing the scarf, the color, I forgot what the name at the moment, that they wear, and they all had their they all had their Starbucks cups, and I'm like, why aren't these people working and doing jobs, and who are they? Somebody's obviously paying them. Do you feel that way, that somebody's paying these people? And all the people that I know, the youngins, I'll call them youngins because I'm in the Panhandle and the South is rubbed off on me. They're absolutely clueless. They're absolutely they're these 20-something, a lot of them are women, and they're clueless, and they would never survive over there if they were dropped off in, Palestine.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are paid, and we have the proof of that. In fact, even the Biden administration gave us the data a couple of months ago that Iran was paying for a lot of this. So, honestly, it has a lot to do with them being paid activists. They're not interested in actually going to the real Gaza or the real Middle East or the real Iran or anything like that. So that's not going to happen, right? So that is an absolute certainty now, and that's one thing to remember. In addition to, again, as I said, there are some real members of Hamas and Hezbollah and some other groups. The money for them is going through some shell organizations in a by the way, a suburb of New York City called Westchester. So that's happening. It's outrageous, but true. This is what's going on right now. This is what we're dealing with. So, absolutely, this is what's happening right now.
And I assume you watched the debate last night, and I desperately want Ukraine to be done, and I want Israel to find peace. But I don't know. Do you think it's possible for Israel to deal with Hamas? And I mean, we still have hostages. Plus, they just executed 6, and I'm so ticked about it.
Yeah. No. There's no deal to be made with them. They've rejected every ceasefire. the one coherent thing that Joe Biden said in the original debate on June 27th was that he blamed the whole war on Hamas. And he actually said that. And I thought to myself, oh, boy, that's lovely. And he was right. Then later, of course, he ended up talking about how the protesters have a point. They don't have a point. If everything is Hamas's fault and they haven't accepted the ceasefire offerings, then they don't have a point, right? The protesters on the streets. So, everyone needs to be aware of that. There's no deal to be made here. And he did misspeak during the convention, not only when he said the protesters had a point, but he talked about how he's been working on a peace deal. No, he's been working on a ceasefire deal. There's a difference between peace. Peace is a treaty. Peace is we move forward now. Peace is we try to be partners in some way, even if it's just a cold peace. There's no peace here. It's just about we're going to stop shooting at each other while we get some hostages back, maybe. And by the way, emphasis on some, not all, including the hostages who were found dead a week and a half ago, who were not specifically on the list of hostages that were going to be potentially released in the ceasefire deal that Hamas rejected. So this narrative that, Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, could have gotten those hostages out, there's absolutely no fact to that. There's no factual basis for that.
Well, do you feel...
That's where we are.
Do you feel, because, we've got our new Joint Chief of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, that is an Air Force general. He's come here. I've met him in person. So he was, sent over to Israel. Blinken's been over there. I just don't think these people want to help Israel. I feel like we're tying their hands. And I don't know. I mean, is it too strong of a statement? I think Hamas they're terrorists. They need to be eliminated. Is that why is that a bad thing to say? Is that not the solution right there?
Of course, it's the solution. They need to be, these people. There's no ideology there. It's not like, these people want to represent the Palestinians and get an economy going and build real schools. None of that is happening. Okay, none of that is happening. What's happening is. They basically want to kill the Jews. The Palestinian people, if you want to call them that, because at first they were called something else. A lot of them were Ottoman. I'm not trying to demean them. They're certainly people. It's just what you call them has changed over time. That's what I mean. You used to be able to say the Arab-Israeli conflict. Now you have to say the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. That doesn't make any sense to me. But okay. So these people they've had at least 12 opportunities, to have either a state or a path to statehood that's been offered to them first by the British, then by the U.S. powers after World War II. And every single time they tell us the same thing. There's really no misunderstanding here. They tell us that they don't want a state if any Jews are living next door, and they would rather die and kill us. Now, I don't know how many times they need to say that before we finally listen to them.
Right.
They're adults. I don't know. To me, I think it's actually a form of, you want to talk about racism. It's racist not to listen to adult people who constantly tell you the same thing.
Well, I guess the reason I fight so hard too is because I think it is racism, and then I'm like, if they exterminate Jews, Catholics are right there. We're next in line, and I'm trying to live in harmony, but I'm also a military woman, and we take out terrorists. We always have.
Right.
So, and you lived over there, I guess, or flew back and forth helping them. I mean, is there any solution? What can we do as Americans? I just feel like my hands are tied. I'm just fighting people on X that, hate me because I like Jewish people.
Yeah. Well, look, the first thing is, and this is really important. The first thing is that no American soldier, sailor, Marine, corpsman, whatever, needs to ever be put in harm's way on behalf of Israel. People who say that and use that terminology are either anti-Semites who are trying to turn this into something it isn't, or stupid. We have a wonderfully peaceful way to deal with most of this, which is just stop sending money to Iran. I don't know how hard that is for people. Right. I don't know why that's hard for people to understand.
But
I
forgot about
been
that.
Paying
That's
for this.
True.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Right. And there were people, by the way, on the extreme left and the extreme right who continue to pretend that that's the choice. That's outrageous that people are being told, well, the only choice is war, and they want war. And I find that to be really quite insulting, dangerous, and dishonest. It's really dishonest. Now, that's what the Obama people, by the way, pushed that nonsense when they were pushing for the Iran deal. They said, listen, unless we give Iran all this money, it's going to be war, which is just the other way around. We gave them the money, and that guaranteed that we were going to have war.
Well, because then they can buy
They
people.
have this money. Yeah. Listen, they would like to kill with no money, but it makes it a lot easier when they do have money.
When you have money.
Well,
yeah. You and I have clarity on this. We need to run for office, I guess. Now, let me ask you one thing, because I just, in the back of my head, you know how they've like had a ceasefire to give children the polio vaccination. Do you think that, I don't know, I've like been worried about, I'm like, who stops a war for that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that whole thing? Is there anything nefarious there, or everybody is thinking about the children? Yeah, let's go to war the next day.
I mean, there's obviously. I mean, I don't think there's anything nefarious as far as what Israel wants to do because of that. But there's absolutely a chance that the people that the Hamas people will use that as a pretext to kill Israelis. I mean, sure, they'll take that as a respite. But this, by the way, has been Israel's MO from the beginning, and I don't think that Israel can change this in that they've been the most humanitarian army in the history of the world. Israel, for many, 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 many years, has had the ability to wipe out its enemies who want to wipe them out. They don't do it because it would kill too many civilians. That's the only reason, which is why the slur of genocide is always used against the Israelis, because they know that's the complete opposite of the truth and would be the most hurtful, because there are Israelis, and even some that I know personally, who have died because of this doctrine. Israel puts its own army in harm's way because of all this. So that to me is really sad. So there's one thing. And they also need to provide electricity. They provide electricity and water to Gaza for humanitarian reasons. Okay. But they should reserve the right to withhold that stuff in the midst of a shooting war. And if only the United States and Europe supported Israel in doing that and said, listen, Israel's right. You guys are using all these supposedly humanitarian sites to kill Israelis. We're going to support Israel cutting off your humanitarian aid until you surrender. That would end the war tomorrow. But they don't do that. They always know they get supporters in mostly Europe, but also sometimes in the United States. And so the war goes on and on and on for decade after decade.
Well, so that leads me to we're going to change gears because I'm sure you watched the debate. I mean, I really think Trump needs to get back in so that when Trump was in, we didn't have all of these conflicts. I think people took us seriously. We've had Biden that's just been on vacation. I assume you watched the debate last night. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, she did better than I thought, and I felt like it was that Trump was in a cage match, 3-on-1 there. So what are your thoughts, Jake?
Well, obviously, first of all, I don't like calling these debates even well before the Trump era. I believe that these so-called presidential debates are nothing of the sort. They're very, very embarrassing. They're a disgusting format that I've never liked. And again, this has nothing to do with media bias right now. It's just the format. It's ridiculous. We're the country that hosted the great debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas in 1858. 7 2-hour or something longer, free-form conversations with no moderator about slavery and the future of the country. And not only did those debates, provide some real content and actual policy discussion, but the two of them gained a great respect for each other. So much so that 2 years later, when the Civil War began, Stephen Douglas rushed to the White House. Stephen Douglas could have rushed to the Confederacy and could have been president of the Confederacy if he really wanted to, frankly. Instead, he rushed to the White House to say, Mr. President, you have my full support, and you need to raise a bigger army. So that just goes to show what a real debate and what real discussion can do. What would the worst thing that could happen be if just Trump and Kamala Harris sat on a stage together and talked for 2 hours?
Oh, I would love a fireside chat, because then he would go, well, why? What's your, how do you feel on transgender surgery for illegals? Because nobody's asking these questions.
That's right. So we didn't get that. And we're never going to get it as long as this happens. But more importantly, I think, listen, this election now, whether we like it or not, is going to be decided by very low information voters. Actually, that's not my favorite word. I would say low engaged voters, people who may really at this point very likely might not even vote. But obviously, the ones who do will make the difference in this election. So the question I have to ask myself is, if they happen to have watched the debate, which is certainly not for sure, right? That if they did happen to watch the debate last night, was there anything they saw that would really convince them one way or the other? And I absolutely don't think so. I really don't think so. I think the only thing that happened was Harris did well enough for some of her more shy supporters to feel more comfortable in saying publicly that they're going to vote for her. And that's not different, because they would have done that anyway. So you have someone like Taylor Swift, who puts out a very long statement about why she's going to, which was totally unconvincing, because it was, when you have an aha moment, which is what she was trying to pretend she had, you don't write 10 paragraphs about it. It's a one-sentence deal, sometimes less.
I think if I was Kamala's staff, I would have been ticked off that she put that out right after I survived the debate, because when Kamala, did the DNC, and then the next day RFK came and endorsed Trump with his magical speech, and it was amazing. I thought that took the wind out of her sails, and I kind of felt like that happened last night. And maybe that was planned, because she was going to do so bad that they needed a Taylor Swift moment to divert her attention. I feel like I'm chasing acorns in this news cycle for the last couple of months. Yeah. I'm like, okay, acorn, I'm this crazy squirrel. And I read your op-ed that you wrote in Newsweek, which it was in June, end of June, and it was for the first debate with Biden, and it was kind of fun to read that, prepping for you to come on, because I, in a million years, never thought this was going to go down with Kamala, and then I think you said in your op-ed that was like the first debate without an audience, and I guess last night there was no audience. And I like to have an audience, because I feel like you get some, more energy and you feel it more. Are you that way too?
Yeah, no, it's a disgrace. I forgot, there's so many disgraces from last night that I can't even remember where to start. But we're at a point now in America where we've decided that it's accepted. We already have a problem with democracy in America, in that we have a candidate who was never in the primaries, never been subjected to the voters, and has been basically indemnified from the political process. And now we're having debates without an audience. What's the argument for that? Even during 2020, when we had the COVID situation, we had people, we had people in the audience. So what's the argument? It's really insane and a really bad look. And I'm not talking about whether it helps one candidate or it helps another. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about, does it help us? Yeah. I want people to be there in the room.
Well, I can't believe that she's the chosen one, because I remember, when she ran, she was the first one out presidentially, and she's literally cannot talk. And then when you compare apples to oranges, Trump and Vance have talked to 5 million people and done interviews, and we get one awful interview with CNN with her ball and chain, Tim Walz next to her, with no substance again. So as a voter, I'm frustrated. How do you see it?
Yeah, no, this is outrageous, and it's very indicative of a news media, again, that I worked in for 30 years, a mainstream news media that is so destroyed from within that it doesn't know that you can't. It doesn't understand that you can't accept this situation about a presidential candidate not being willing to really go before the news media. Don't they understand how suicidal that is? And I think it's indicative of a bigger problem, which I could talk about for a long time, about how the regime news media and their the corporations that own regime news media channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, they are using their news channels as a lobbying arm. So they don't really care so much about whether they make money. Right. Because they have other businesses, these corporations, that are very, very susceptible to regulatory problems. So they use this so in other words, they're not that worried about ratings, and they're certainly not worried about journalism. Mm-hmm. And they hire people who are, and that kind of trickles down. That's a management feeling, a management ethos that trickles down, whether they use the exact words to say that or not. And so that's why they're willing to allow this. This is a disaster for the news business in this country. This election has been a disaster from the beginning. No contentious primaries, which is 6 months worth of usually high-rated news, in the toilet this year, right? Now you have a presidential candidate not willing to do interviews or really speak to the public. A disaster for these people and their individual careers.
In today's social media 24/7 world that you and I live in, because I'm a trained journalist, I've worked in the military doing public affairs. I've been on TV, radio. I've done it all too, and I've written stories. I expect a candidate to talk to the media all the time, or I don't want you to be my candidate, because then I don't know what you're thinking. And she's gotten a pass. So I know you're an economist kind of guy. And well, before I ask you about the economy, have you always been a conservative? Because you had that aha moment with the guns and 9/11. Were you always a conservative? Because a lot of Jewish people are not. And I'm always confused why they're not, because especially lately, I'm like, join our team. Even Alan Dershowitz is like, I'm done with the Dem Party. Were you always a conservative?
No, I became a conservative around the age of 30 or so.
Really?
And it was a gradual kind of thing. It started when I got into college, and I was at Columbia University. That's where I went to college, and it was always a liberal school. When I was there, it was liberal. Nothing like today. Nothing as far left as today. But I didn't like. I saw that in large numbers. So that's when I started that process. It took me about 10 years to get there, but I got there.
Really?
So and of course it really has taken over just about everything. Just about every issue I'm conservative about it, except for the stuff that I think is not really binary. There are a number of issues out there, in my opinion, that are not binary, that are not right left. But other than that, I'm pretty right on everything. Yeah, right wing. Yeah.
What's one of the issues that wouldn't be right or left?
Believe it or not. Although there is some of it in there, believe it or not, and I hate to use this, I'm not going to use the I word. I'm going to say traffic instead of the word that ends in structure. When it comes to traffic and city planning, there has to be more of a partnership between private business and actually the government. I don't want complete government planning, but I also don't want complete free market when it comes to the building of our roads, the planning of our cities, mass transit. I want mass transit, not public transit. I want privately owned mass transit. But like they have in Japan. By the way, Japan has the best mass transit in the world because it's privately
I lived there
but,
7 years. Everything in Japan's amazing.
But the government still backstops it. In other words, they can never go bankrupt.
Okay.
So while they don't hire government cronies and idiots to run the mass transit, they also have that government cushion. And honestly, I think that that's necessary in large cities.
Well, I like
so
that.
I'm not 100% libertarian or conservative on that. That's probably my biggest one. And I'm a freedom guy. I'm a big fan of consenting adults doing what they want to do with each other as long as non-consenting adults aren't involved. I'm not completely conservative, but if there's a scale of 1 to 100 on conservative, I'm probably at a 98.
Okay, well, Jake, I love it. That's wonderful. Okay, so you're back to now economy, because this is your world, which always scares me. Because I don't know why. Because I just spend the money and I don't pay the bills. I just spend the money. But what are the major differences that you can expect, or we can expect, in an economy if Trump wins or Kamala is president? Because she's trying to say that she's going to give $25,000 to first-time buyers, all the capital gain stuff. So this is your world. Do we need to be scared? I mean, because I'm praying it's Trump. But what if it's Kamala? So how do you see the differences between them?
Well, the first thing we need to understand is that we are really going into recession as we speak. That the markets are saying it. We've had a lot of,
and that was on my list to ask you. We're seeing it now. We're seeing that the inflation isn't going down fast enough, and that's one part of the aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is that we're starting to see real jobs slow down, and we're starting to see real growth slow down. So we're seeing that now, and that is really quite depressing. And so the next president is going to come in with a recession, I think, or something darn close to it. So there's that. The second thing is, though, of course, we're not going. Donald Trump has humbled me on a number of occasions when he's obviously come up with
new policies that I'd never thought of. Most of his supporters don't even know that he passed and created the most successful trickle-up tax policy in history. You've heard Democrats talk about this for years. I want trickle-up tax policy. Okay. He did it when he doubled the standard deduction for people who don't itemize their taxes. Now he's come up with another thing I'd never thought about to help the blue collar or lower middle class, which is the no taxes on tips.
Yes,
which I'd never thought of either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other ideas he has. The tariffs turned out to be, for an economic right-wing purist like me, the tariffs have had nothing to do with our inflation in this country. We had almost no inflation when these tariffs were in place. Most of them are still in place, and that's not the reason why we have inflation right now. I don't like tariffs unless you're dealing with a country that's deliberately dead set on having a trade war with you and attacking you and not necessarily making money, and that's what we have with China. By the way, their fentanyl policy is the same thing as their economic policy. They're not flooding America with fentanyl to make money. This isn't the drug dealing of the 80s with these guys who want to be like Scarface and Al Pacino. They're not looking to make money off of fentanyl. They're looking to kill our young men and women. There's no policy. There's no counter policy to that other than you block the border and you kill the people who are bringing it into the country. You got to kill them. They're bringing in enough fentanyl every day to kill all of them.
Jay, because our politicians do not have clear clarity on this. And I'm telling you, I cannot believe all the people I know that somebody has died that they know of fentanyl, and somebody, an Air Force officer that I knew died because he took fentanyl. So it literally touches everybody. So, okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
so there you go.
Okay. And then what about, they're talking about the Fed, I guess, is going to meet next week. How are you seeing all of that? Because, interest rates nobody can buy a house now. And, that's the whole thing is like, will my children never be able to afford a house? And then we're all stuck in our houses, if you got a low interest rate. How do you see all that stuff?
The Fed, one of the reasons why the market is very upset right now is that the market wanted the Fed to cut interest rates by 0.5 percentage point.
Yes, I saw that.
It was an outside
today.
chance. It was an outside chance, but now it's definitely not going to happen because the inflation numbers we got this morning show that inflation is stronger than they thought. So they're only going to get a 0.25 point cut, and that's why the markets are upset. They're also upset because they think the economy is too weak and needs a jump start from a 0.5 point cut, a number of 0.5 point cuts. They're not going to get it. So that's a huge issue right now, and so I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to cut by 0.5 point. It'll have a decent effect for some people, but not enough. And I'm sorry for all, I really feel bad for all these young people in America who cannot afford a home right now. These mortgage rates are high. Prices have not come down. They teach you in economics. You're going to, if mortgage rates go up, then you'll see lower home prices eventually because people need to get their homes sold. Well, that hasn't happened. What happened? Why didn't that?
But isn't everybody saying if she gets in and you get $25,000, it's going to bump up the prices anyways also of a home?
Exactly.
And then her rent control. So do tax cuts.
Yeah. By the way, that's again, let's go back to 5th grade, shall we? What did you learn in 5th grade? What did you learn in 5th grade about what determines the price of anything? Supply and demand, right? That's what we all learned. You can't change the price of anything unless you either fix the supply or the demand. So if you want prices to go down, you either have to decrease demand. Well, that's not going to happen. People are going to want to have homes. It's not going to change that. People like to have a roof over their shoulders, right over their heads. Or you can increase the supply. Speaking of another thing that humbled me, Donald Trump last week at the Economic Club in New York talked about using federal land, which we only discussed in the past about using that to drill for oil. Somebody came along, all of a sudden Donald Trump figured out you can use federal land for other things that we need, like building homes. So he proposed building homes on federal land where there will be much fewer regulations and the cost will come down tremendously. So that was another brilliant idea that, of course, which is so much better than just giving people cash. They absolutely will jack up the price of the house based on what cash on hand you have. It's like when you go to a car dealer, when you're buying a car, you never want to say, what can you give me for $500 a month payment? Well, then they'll give you something that was really worth $300, right? You never want to do that.
So when you hear her Kamala say that, she's going to build 3 million homes and this rent control stuff, this is your world. What is this like BS coming out of her mouth? I mean,
yeah, it's ridiculous. It's not what it doesn't make any sense. The entire Democratic Party has no understanding. And by the way, most Republicans don't do this enough either. I mean, when was the last time you heard a Republican talk the way I do about supply and demand? This is the way we should talk about the price of anything, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's college tuition, whether it's real estate. Everything should be discussed. Health insurance. I long ago passed a rule in my own life. I will not do an interview or discuss the price of anything important unless they're willing to do it along the lines of the law of supply and demand. And there you go. And unless we do that, so forget the Democrats. Even the Republicans don't do this enough, in my opinion. So I think that's a huge problem. A huge problem.
All right. Well, we've been around the world here, and why do people need to vote for Trump? Because if these people are on the fence, you and I are not on the fence. Tell us, Jake, why people need to vote for Trump.
Well, I think that honestly, the people, I think the wisest people who have been voting for Trump since 2016 have understood that he is an imperfect vessel. He's an imperfect guy. We saw that last night. He didn't win the debate because it's not because he's a bad person. It's just because this is not the way that he communicates to the American public, and it would be great if he did sometimes. But unless you're really naive, you have to understand that a perfect vessel, a Barack Obama-type speaker, a Mitt Romney-type speaker, could never win. He is an imperfect vessel to bring us much better policy. That's what he can bring us. And so that to me is, again, it's very frustrating to have people who don't seem to understand that, who don't seem to get that. And it's
they're blinded by his personality, because even when I was the Trump chair in my county in 2015-16, like the haters hated him. I even fought with my priest. He's like, oh, Donald Trump. I go, he's going to get his 3 Supreme Court justices, Father. And what happened? I got my 3, and I shouldn't have to fight with my priest, because if you're a pro-lifer, hey, you wanted him in. I just want people to win, and I want them to forget about his personality. Let's look at what's in your bank account and how our country's doing, and the safety of America and Israel. So
that's, again, judging someone on their policy, as much as that makes sense to you and me, it's very hard for even very well-educated people to do. It takes a lot of humility, I think, for an educated person to understand what I just said about you have to support Donald Trump, even though he may be not the person that you want to invite to your house, or he may not be the person that you quite understand.
I'd invite him to my house. It would be fun.
I know. A lot of people would, and so would I, because I grew up with guys like that. Anyone who went to church or synagogue every single day of their life, like I did growing up, knew the 70-year-old guy who sat in the back who talked like that. Okay, we all know that. Okay, I'm used to it, so I don't have a problem.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably
that other people do.
But and then when you reflect back on the RNC, their convention and our DNC convention, it was night and day. Just hope and joy were actually at the RNC, not at the DNC. And then I don't know. I reflect back to his granddaughter Kai giving her speech, and it was the cutest thing, and it kind of showed that he is a human. Any final thoughts, Jake? Because it's your first time on Veronica Live. I'm calling you back. It's been so fun.
Oh, yeah. No, I think my biggest thought is, look, you're not, there was a final thought that Kamala Harris talked about, Donald Trump isn't there for you. And I thought to myself, well, good. Whatever happened to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Beautiful.
If you look at the actual policies that he passed and the effects of them, not the rhetoric around them, it's not even a choice, because Kamala Harris hasn't really told us her policies, and I don't believe her when she does. So ask not what you do. I don't like him. He personally offends me. I mean, imagine what John F. Kennedy how he would have laughed at that. So what?
It's not
Grow
about
up.
personalities.
The country isn't about your comfort. You know? It's not about your comfort, and there's nothing that he did. I feel like getting a doll and going to all these people and saying, "Show me on this doll where Donald Trump hurt you." You know, it's baloney.
Well, maybe because you're a New Yorker.
You
know, you're tough. I'm a military woman. I'm tough.
Yeah.
And we're in this woke society now that somebody stubs their toe and they have to go to the ER. Everybody's so weak and woke. So, well, I like that. I do. So we've been talking to Jake Novak, and I bumped into you on X. I'm so happy I did. You're a political and economic analyst. You can find him on X at Jake New York, and then your Substack is Jake Novak, and you're out there. And Jake, it's been a pleasure having you on Veronica Live.
My pleasure. My pleasure as well, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining Veronica Live.